Hi, I'm Arthur, and this is part 5 in a 20-part series I am doing covering the all-star chapters of Space Marine in no particular order. You do not have to have seen the other parts to understand this one or any one. They are standalone. But you know what? If you don't, I'm gonna make an April Fool's video about every single Garten Ban video game, and you will have no choice but to listen to me talking about the lore of Jumbo Josh. Salamanders. I think they are a bit bland, but you know what? I think they deserve peace and love. And also for people to stop talking about the Eldar child thing. It really isn't that funny. I mean, it's funny to me, but it's just because I don't really like the Eldar, but whatever, broski. You do you. The Salamanders are one of the most popular chapters of Space Marines in the setting, and with good reason. They are an incredibly well-rounded chapter with a diverse and distinct set of lore that makes them very easy to identify in a crowd. Though, shout out to that one guy who, when I was playing a small force of Raptors Marines, saw the green boys and asked how I did my Salamander's paint scheme so well. Yes, there were actually bird head transfers on them as well, which, I don't know, man. I still haven't recovered, but whatever. The successor chapters of the Salamanders are some of the weirder chapters of Marines. But the unfortunate part about the Salamanders is, well, they have a tendency to sacrifice themselves to save others, which leaves them with not exactly a lot of Marines to use for the formation of other chapters. This is the reason why I don't believe they have any second founding successor chapters, as they just didn't really have enough guys at the end of the Horus Heresy to divide up into other chapters. So yeah, this did stop them from making chapters for quite some time, but after the setting progressed for a little while, they actually had the room to start distributing guys in different places. Basically led to them being one of the harder to identify chapters of Marines out there, in terms of successors that is, as their most distinguishable physical traits are that they are particularly larger than most other Marines, have a tendency towards kindness, and also, I don't know if you notice this, but the charcoal black skin and bright red eyes. But the thing is, that defect comes from the organ that regulates a Space Marine's skin color. It goes into hyperactive mode once it is on the surface of Nocturne and the sun of Nocturne hits them, turning their skin that way. So it doesn't matter what ethnicity they were prior, they will always look like that. With a bunch of people that have their gene seed never having been to Nocturne, well, you have guys that just have the more common skin tones found upon their respective homeworlds. So why am I telling you all this? Because I'm gonna speed blitz every last goddamn chapter of Space Marines that is canonically a successor of the Salamanders, outside of just a few White Dwarf entries that I found that I just felt were a little bit lackluster. And yeah, so I'm going to mention quite a few of these here, and a lot of them are going to make sense, and a lot of them are going to be very, 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 very weird. I am looking at you, Black Vipers. Don't think I don't know what you did. But before we get into it and talk about the very Salamanders, let's talk gamer subs. You guys want to know something kind of funny? I accidentally ended up ordering over 40 cans of the premium canned gamer subs to my Airbnb for LVO. It's something to keep me and the other content creators I was with satiated, you know, and energized for the stuff we had to get done. It ended up arriving about halfway through the trip, so I legit thought we wouldn't be able to get through all of them. But lo and behold, as a testament to how good these things are, we ran out of them about a day before we all had to leave, much to my chagrin, because I had an early flight that I needed to be awake for. I'm also a little annoyed because they announced the new flavor of these premium cans right after I got back, and it's one of my favorites from the regular gamer subs, which is Brand Risk, which, if you don't know, is a crisp mango flavor. And yes, it is as refreshing as you think it is. So if you are like me, you enjoy the delightful taste of mango on a hot winter's day, then use my code BONEZONE at checkout for 10% off your order on a pack of premium energy cans. They are, at current times, my favorite way to drink gamer subs. I just like the texture of carbonation, to be completely fair. So yeah, pick some up and let me know what you think, because they are one of my favorite drinks right now. Thanks as always to Gamer Subs for supporting this channel and supporting my love for energy drinks while also being pretty good on the wallet. And yeah, let's get back to the video. To start us off on this list, I put these guys at the top of the list because I had a bit of a weird confusion moment, and Yeah, basically, the Storm Giants are actually a pretty old chapter in regards to real-world years, being created quite a long time ago. They are a very odd chapter of Marines, as they are incredibly secretive, but also have the weird-ass bone-white coloration that doesn't really give away much about their heritage nor about their culture. They are described as weirdly strong and a little bit larger than your average Space Marine, and because of that, people assume that there's a generally accepted gene seed mutation with their Biscopia, which is something that increases the muscle mass of a Space Marine. They have a tendency for upfront and personal firefight style combat, which is very similar to the Salamanders, and that's about it. Yeah, I legit only included them this far up due to a misremembering of the chapter. I legit forgot these guys were their own thing. I confused them for the Stormlords chapter, which are one of my favorite chapters. They have one of the worst paint schemes I've ever seen, and they're also well known for creating legendary thorn on the side of the Imperium, Zoofor the Impaler, a Khorne Marine who got corrupted from the Stormlords. We don't know much about the Storm Giants, other than they are incredibly secretive about their origin, and they prefer to fight close up, usually probably with flamers and melee, which is usually the hallmark of a Salamander successor. So there is that, yeah. Regardless, let's move on to one you all probably know, the Black Dragons. The Black Dragons are such a fun chapter of Marines, probably one of my top 10 favorites, as they are objectively the chapter closest to the line of deviance that the Imperium accepts, and I honestly think that it just depends on the day and the time and also the mood of the Inquisitor investigating them if they're ever going to get excommunicated from the Imperium, but yeah. They are a horribly mutated chapter that, due to a mutated osmodula, they have constant bone growth across their bodies that manifests as gigantic spikes and horns and shit. They see these spikes as a point of pride, making sure that they are sharp and oftentimes coated in durable metal, allowing them to be able to use them in combat more effectively. They usually also, either through mutation or ritual, have sharpened teeth that give them a bit more of an intimidating visage. Oh, and due to them having a mutated osmodula, they are probably canonically the tallest Space Marine chapter in the setting. Not the heaviest or the widest or just the biggest, just the tallest, as the osmodula is responsible for, bone development. So they are canonically tall, lanky, very pale, with teeth like a stereotypical monster, and giant bone spikes and horns protruding from every major joint, and sometimes their forehead. So you know what the funniest part about these guys is? These dudes are actually kind of chill. Like, they literally just worship the Emperor, as, every other Space Marine chapter is prone to do, and wish to perform the service in his name. It's honestly kind of cool. They are frequently investigated by the Imperium of Mankind, and because of that, they often get a lot of disconcerting looks to them. But in general, nah, bro, they are so on the level, it's not even funny. Apparently, being kind of a nice guy is one of the genetic traits they inherited from their progenitor, which is all really cool. I like that. They do like murdering people on the battlefield because, you can't really get, the bone claw coated in metal out of you once you have it, right? So you got 10-foot tall Wolverines, usually equipped with chainswords if they don't have enough bone claw yet. So it's kind of hard not to squish clap people to death like a very ripe grape, and you are in fact a winemaker. Though, if I had to complain about one singular thing about them, it's that they occupy a niche of Marines that a lot of Blood Angel successors themselves also tend to occupy, which is, man, they are just a singular color, and that's it. So it's kind of hard to distinguish them from, like, Iron Hands and other pitch black Space Marine chapters. They do get confused unless you are able to 3D print your own spikes onto them or be able to carve out your own. The idea of GW ever putting out an upgrade kit for them is almost impossible, but it would be really cool, maybe in like a Deathwatch upgrade kit of some sort. But regardless, now that we have the basics of what a successor could be, let's cover something weirder. Let's get into the Salamanders who have fallen to chaos. The idea of chaos-corrupted salamanders isn't really a foreign one. It is weird because I feel like in the modern day, especially for people who exclusively play the tabletop, no one really acknowledges the fact that, like, I'd say more than half of all chaos warbands and marines that are out there have nothing to do with the old legions. And the old legions themselves kind of act independently on their own unless they're hired out to other smaller warbands. The fact that there is such an idea of a chaos salamander shouldn't be a crazy thing, as there are are so many chapters of Marines out there who do fall to chaos on a regular basis. Like the Star Scorpions, which were, if memory serves, an Ultramarine successor, fell pretty hard and became a warband known as the Pure. Hell, most of the chapters that were founded out of the 21st founding, you know, the ones we don't talk about, got struck from record, allegedly fell to chaos, and because of that, we don't know much about them. Good example of that would be the Blood Gorgons, for we do know a little bit about their record as they took a little bit longer than the others to fall. The Salamanders unfortunately have to deal with the fact that their gene seed does have a moderate level of chance of mutation, which mutation tends to lead to being excised from the Imperium to some degree, most of the time, unless you're the Black Dragons. But being excommunicated usually means you'd have no resources and thus instead either have to go on a penitent crusade until you die, or resort to darker means to survive. Though, shout out to the Relictors, who tend to go towards the former rather than the latter and tend to sacrifice themselves willingly instead of resorting to chaos. They're a chapter of Marines that goes outside the bounds of the Imperium to get whatever. Basically, the first and probably most well-known warband of the Salamanders that is a chaos corrupted warband would be the Dragon Warriors, which I suppose calling them a warband of Salamanders isn't entirely correct. Much like most renegade warbands, they are a hodgepodge of a bunch of random dudes, but they are, if memory serves me correctly, mostly a mix of Salamanders and Black Dragons, led by a Chaos Sorcerer originally from the Salamanders. They have a bit of an interesting story to them, and I actually might cover it at some point in its entirety, so I just want to give you a bit of a general overview of them right now. So what you need to know is one of their more defining moments was when the third company of the Salamanders chapter was sent after them to kind of beat the shit out of them and kill them because, you know, they were doing chaosy stuff on a cremating cemetery world. Basically, they killed the Chaos Lord of the Warband and badly burned the sorcerer Nihilan, who was kind of close to that Chaos Lord, and Nihilan ended up swearing vengeance on the Salamanders forever, which led to a bunch of wacky hijinks in the future. Thus why I want to cover it later. Though this is one of those chapters that I think is kind of nebulous in a weird way. As it stands, they have not been mentioned a while. This kind of feels like GW is ducking them a little bit. You know how James Workshop tends to not like mentioning the Sons of Malice and only acknowledges them when it's time for them to try and get more people into the game who like obscure lore. You know, that single sentence about them that was mentioned during the Fall of Cadia, that kind of shit. The Dragon Warriors, to my knowledge, haven't been mentioned in a while, to the point where if you look them up on YouTube, you won't really find many options unless it's a lore compilation. It's why I feel like I should definitely add them here, just to talk about them and kind of broach the subject. So let's talk about something else no one really brings up, which is the Arcs of Omen campaign, which happened. Yeah, I know, it was kind of weird in terms of events, but it also seemed to kind of be swept under the rug for the Tyranids appearing in 10th edition. There's a lot to dissect here, but the best thing to know is that in general, there was a lot of weird shit. Farsight almost falling to Khorne, Vashtor securing his position as one of the biggest threats in the setting with Wormwood, which was this massive super demon mega mech planet made up of the weirdest pieces of demon tech in the setting, pieces of Caliban that had been corrupted by Vashtor, and also a bunch of other weird shit. Did I also mention that Arcs of Omen also had the lion showing up in them? Yeah, that was kind of cool. But one of the things we had to discuss here is the murder curse, which was kind of Angron's big thing. The murder curse was this aura that would leak out of Angron. Like a disease, it would slowly erode away the sanity of anyone who was near him and force them to succumb to the corruption of Khorne. Basically, he was making a massive butcher horde of Khornate berserkers wherever he went. And also, might I add, he had a retinue of 8 bloodthirsters, which proved to be his bodyguards. But also, I just gotta say, 8 exalted bloodthirsters and Angron. That's not some dude and his bodyguards. That's like a world-ending force of ultimate proportions. I'm pretty sure that is something that could kill most Primarchs. So this all culminated with Custodes, Sisters of Silence, and Grey Knights working alongside one of the Indomitus fleets to take down Angron. I'll spare you some of the details as it is a bit drawn out, with Angron fleeing a lot, but it ends with Angron being banished, but his murder curse was released in a massive blast wave, and also amplified to the point of actually being near unresistible, or irresistible? Yeah, that's the word. But this led to the entirety of the Indomitus Crusade fleet Quartus immediately falling to chaos, which is kind of insane, as it had a bunch of Primaris Marines on it, which, by the by, we don't have many, if any, records of Primaris Marines successfully fully falling to chaos in recent times. Being possessed and torn to pieces, yeah, but it's kind of something Call tried to program into them as just absolute loyalty. So on this fleet, there was a lot of representations of many different chapters, but also, at least from memory, I tried to confirm this, but it's really hard to find out, but I remember a lot of people talking about this, but yeah, it was a lot of Salamanders were there too, so it was mostly Salamanders. So you have a roving gang of Primaris Salamanders who are affected by the murder curse, as well as a bunch of Ultramarines and such, but also a bunch of battleships infected with it as well. So basically, Angron just speedran making a bunch of new Khorne warbands by farting really aggressively. Will this ever become anything relevant? I don't know. Probably not. The only loyalists that were remaining after were the people who are physically and spiritually impervious to corruption, aside from, like, the direct intervention of the gods. So, a handful of Custodes, Sisters of Silence, and Grey Knights. Albeit, they were probably promptly ripped apart by a tide of screaming Salamanders and Guardsmen, so, yeah, we truly don't know. It would be cool if GW did release a Primaris Khorne Berserker kit as its own thing. Something horribly mutated by rage and hate and dragon scales or some shit that can only be used in generic warbands, not Khorne or World Eater warbands, due to the fact that they're obviously not a World Eater stock, but totally Khorne Berserkers. But I'm also, like, spitballing here, so whatever. There's probably a bunch of other Khornate Salamanders, but those are the best ones I could find. So from here, I have one last segment to the video I want to do, and this is one that I've been kind of thinking of for a while. No joke, I wanted to do this as its own video topic, but yeah, now it's just a segment here, so let me introduce you to the Salamanders Ultima Founding Lightning Round. Pew, 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 pew. Okay, so yeah, Salamanders had like the bunch of new chapters come out of the Ultima Founding. Not many of them have any lore, so I just want to cover all of them in as short a period as possible. So let's speed blitz this shit. First of the Ultima Founding, and the ones you guys probably know the most about, the Dark Krakens. Yeah, you weirdos who have purple as your favorite color usually do obsess over anything that's purple for some reason, though these guys are popular for a good reason outside of that. The Dark Krakens are an Ultima Founding chapter made from the gray shields that were in the Indomitus Crusade. They are the weird odd man out of the various successors because they swap out all the fire iconography for water. Yeah, they were basically put on a planet of almost entirely ocean and night. It was just dark almost all the time. So they have a dark color scheme and a set of squid iconography that really, really looks nice on a tabletop. The planet they hail from, Noctis, is well known for the fact that it has some of the wildest and most out-of-pocket natural predators in the setting of 40k. They are violent, numerous, and also quite large, so the local natives hunt them for both sport, as a rite of proving, and food. This has been adopted into the Dark Kraken's mentality for war as they try to go after the biggest threat at any given moment most times. They are sleek, have a fun history, they get the A+, as they are very unique. Next up, we got the Dragon Spears, which are basically just the Salamanders, but with a bit more spice to them. They are a bit more aggressive, likely due to them serving alongside the goddamn Space Wolves during several campaigns in order to wipe out greenskin hordes. But outside of their disposition to that of the Salamanders and other chapters they meet being notably kind and friendly, they are one of those few chapters of Space Marines that conduct ritualistic acts of cannibalism. Yeah, when a battle brother dies, they usually eat his brain and a few other pieces of him in order to maintain his memories and skills, so it is kind of weird to think that the chapter master probably has the memories of hundreds of dead men, but it's B-. The Covenant of Fire is totally not a Salamander successor, but Call says they are, so I'm gonna roll with it. I mean, when you have a gene seed that is as prone to mutation as the Salamanders, you can get a lot of options, and apparently one of those options is suspiciously like the Word Bearers, because they are. The Covenant of Fire is obsessed with collecting ancient lore from the Imperium's past. They usually burn the books they find afterwards as an act of ritualistic cleansing, but yeah, it is one of their defining traits to seek out the truth of the universe as it pertains to the Imperium, be it religious, philosophical, and so on. Yeah, that totally sounds like the Salamanders, right? Yeah, totally. Next up, we have the totally based in one of my favorite chapters in the entire setting, not just of the Ultima Founding, the Black Vipers. These guys are awesome. Not because they are just like the most total edgelord paint scheme I've ever seen out of any Space Marine chapter out there. Come on, pitch black and like bright red. Okay. But it's because they are, how do I say this? They are totally of Alpha Legion stock. I'm not gonna bait the hook here. Yeah, at least in my head canon, it makes the most sense. They are an incredibly secretive, quiet chapter of Marines who never stays in one spot for too long. They have a long history of making people go missing, and this extends to other chapters of Marines. I didn't mention this before, but the Salamanders, when they find out that there is a successor of theirs out in the middle of nowhere that they have yet to greet, they send out emissaries as an act of goodwill. These emissaries are used to try and induct them into the Prometheum cult, which is a foundational part of the Salamander's existence. Every other chapter I mentioned joined it pretty willingly. Yet whenever the Salamanders sent dude over to the Black Vipers, he goes missing, which is the most Alpha Legion shit you could ask for. And lastly, of the lightning round, we have the Iron Drakes, not to be confused with the Iron Drakes, who ended up falling to Nurgle and becoming a warband known as the Grey Death. No, the Primaris only Ultima Founding Iron Drakes are literally just a thing. They have no lore. They have no established paint scheme. We only know they exist and are a part of the Ultima Founding. So, yeah, and that's kind of just it. I say kind of because, like, I just want to point out this in my research. There is a chapter out there, and I want you to look at it as there is a chapter out there. And I want you to look it up, as it feels like it's a spit in the face whenever I do anything involving looking these specific types of chapters up. Yeah, the Dragon Lords, they are an old Space Marine chapter of Marines and are listed as an unknown progenitor. Fellas, look at the Marine. Look at him. Look at his colors. Now back to me. Yeah, I couldn't figure it out either. It's just so hard to look at all the green armor and fire details and ask who could potentially be their gene sire. That's great. This is fucking stupid. The Dragon Lords didn't do too much of note. It's more just a funny note that they weren't even considered as a suspected chapter in the wiki I was reading during my little looking for sources episode. The Salamanders are a chapter that I have openly stated in the past is not exactly my cup of tea. I think they are a little boring in most of the works that I have read that they are a part of. And to be even further honest, since I can see you're cool and all, I gotta say, it's probably gonna change. I know myself. I felt the same way about the Blood Angels for a while, and then I started to read a lot of media that involved the Blood Angels, and by God, did it start to affect my mental health in the best way possible. The Black Dragons, the Iron Drakes, the Dark Krakens. I gotta say, the successors of the Salamanders are an all-star lineup of some of the weirdest and most interesting successors I've ever seen. Did I miss any chapters on the list? Yeah, probably. Look at the Dragon Lords. I discovered them by accident when I was looking up images to kind of inspire my script. They're one of the odd ones, but there's a bunch of ones that are out there that probably have an unknown lineage, and if you look at them directly, yeah, they're probably related to the Salamanders, and you could trace it back to that. It's just hard to look for sources for those unless I just look up each chapter one at a time that has an unknown source, and I don't... One at a time, guys. One at a time. But with that all being said, what is your favorite Salamander successor? And do you have any armies of what I've listed? I'd love to see pictures, especially if you play Dark Krakens, because the conversions I've been seeing online for them is pretty cool. So feel free to drop off pictures in the Discord, of which has been freshly purged of ne'er-do-wells, which there's a link in the description, by the way. Also, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and for f***'s sake, check out the second channel. I worked hard on that. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me. With your help, I am able to get this work done, support myself, and put up great content into the future. And production, as you could tell, is ramping further and further as we speak. So stay tuned for the cool stuff. Thank you all once again for watching. Until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful night.